everyone, and welcome back to the Bright Side of Life. My name is Melissa Bright, and I am here today with Julie Menanno. And all I have to say is if you have been on Instagram, her account has over 1.2 million followers, and her account is called The Secure Relationship. So, what we are going to be talking about today is how we can get to maybe an insecure relationship to secure. If you don't know what that is yet, that's completely okay. We're going to be talking really about the attachment theory, attachment styles, and give you guys some practical tips to hopefully, make your relationship a little bit better. If I think we can all do that these days. So without further ado, Julie, welcome to the Bright Side of Life. How are you doing?
Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm good. It's good to be here.
Yes, likewise, likewise. So I always like to start kind of at the beginning. I just want to ask you how you got interested in this specific topic of attachment, of relationships. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll try to give you the shorter version. Sometimes I stretch this out a bit too long, but I have six children, and so my husband and I had six, all pretty close together, a stretch of 10 years. They're 22
Mhm.
down to 12 now. One
Yeah.
set of twins in there, and I was just determined to be a good mom. I did not grow up in a very emotionally healthy home, and I wanted nothing more than to recreate, kind of what I didn't have growing up. I really wanted to break these cycles, these cycles, these intergenerational trauma cycles that we all get stuck in. And I just wasn't able to do. I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what's the missing piece here. Like I'm
Mhm.
trying to give my kids everything, um, the right school, the right home, the right clothes. I was staying home with them, just kind of like the right external environment. And I couldn't figure it out. I mean, something was missing, something was missing. And I was reading all these self-help books and for parenting, and they all seemed to have conflicting information. I
Mm.
think there's a lot better parenting information out there now than when this was going on for me in the early 2000s. And
Yeah.
so basically, I thought, after my six was born, I was feeling very extremely overwhelmed, extremely burnt out, just very demoralized. I mean, I'm not saying I was the worst mom ever because I definitely wasn't, but I knew something was really missing.
Mhm.
And so I said, and I've always had an interest in psychology. I wanted to be a therapist from a very young age. And so I decided to go back to grad school. And it was a few different reasons. One of them is I'm not figuring this out in self-help books. So I need to just like learn psychology for myself and figure
Yeah.
out what's going on here with humans. And so I went back. My youngest was one, and I fell in love with this type of therapy called object relations, which is basically kind of like a precursor to attachment theory. Object is a weird word, but objects are basically like humans
Okay.
or in that terminology. So it's like human relations as opposed to this more Freudian view where we all just are kind of born with all this psychic energy that
Mm.
so it was the object relations therapists really are the ones who started talking about parenting and how parenting can impact us throughout life. And then the attachment theorists came and kind of piggybacked on that, all
Okay.
kind of happening together, but different ways. And so I got really into object relations and was diving into that. And that just naturally took me to attachment theory. And none of this stuff is being taught at the time in grad school, really. Object relations was too old fashioned. Attachment theory there were just, at the time, it just wasn't being taught. And so I was just kind of doing my own, I was doing all their work on the side as fast as I could, just busy
Mhm.
work, and then diving in and teaching myself attachment theory. That really started to change my relationship with myself, with my partner, with my kids. That's where the shift started happening. I did not want to work with couples once I graduated, no interest in that. I didn't want to work with kids either. I had my own kids to work with. I just wanted to work with adult individuals. That was it,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so, but then I had to see a couple because I had to get for my licensure, you have to see a certain like 500
Oh.
couple hours. And so I saw my first couple and I was like, wow, this is really hard, like really hard. I mean, you are dealing with a lot going on in a room when you're working with a
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah.
two individuals, the relationship, which has a life of its own, all their histories, layers and layers. And that just really excited me. I was like, there's this part of me that's like, likes the intellectual stimulation. It's like chess, you're paying attention to a lot of moving parts
Mhm.
at once. But it's also, really emotionally rewarding. So after that session, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, clearly I'm painting a picture of someone who needs to be really good at anything I try, which is, it has its downsides. But I mean, that day I got on the computer and found the first EFT training in the country. I lived in LA at the time, and that training happened to be in Bozeman, Montana. It was the first intro level. It was a few days after that. I got the ticket. EFT is emotionally focused therapy for couples. It is based on attachment theory. It's a way to treat couples using attachment theory. Sue Johnson created it, and I highly recommend it for any listeners for couples therapy. But so I flew out, got into Bozeman at night. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I couldn't see anything. Woke up the next morning, went downtown to this hotel, and not only fell in love with EFT, but fell in love with Bozeman. And so 4 months later, me and my children, my 6 kids, and my husband are living in Bozeman. Like, they're in school. We both have jobs. We have a house, like the whole deal. It was crazy meant to be. Anyway, um, from that day forward, I never took on another individual client. I just was straight couples, and absolutely fell head over heels in love with couples work. I'll tell you the two reasons. One is that um, I was really having this really beautiful, emotionally supportive relationship with my clients. People
Mhm.
love going to their therapist most of the time because
Yeah.
we're trained to validate, to listen, to reflect, and that feels good to people. And then
Yep.
they're leaving me and going out into their world with people that don't know how to provide that level of support. And they don't know how to
Yep.
provide that level of support either. And I was like, wow, I can, instead of this being about me and the client, I can do that too, but I can now put that energy into their relationship. And so it was like, now instead of people going home to partners who weren't really growing with them, now they're both growing together. And it
Mm.
just, it seems like for me, and everybody likes to work with different things, and there's very much a space for individual therapy, and I have the utmost respect for people who do that. But for me, it felt like a more complete way to work because I'm really seeing the whole person in here. Like, really everything about who we are comes
Yeah.
alive in our relationship. So it just felt like more to work with, more productive, more effective. For me, that's how it all felt.
Yeah.
So here I am,
I love that story, and I love that's how you got to Bozeman. We were talking earlier
Yes.
about she's in Montana and so is my brother, and anyways,
Yeah,
so thank you for sharing all that. Now, I
you're
also
welcome.
love that you said that you had no interest in helping like couples and how just one session completely changed you.
Yes.
A little caveat to how I got so obsessed with attachment theory was big surprise. My relationship was in shambles.
Yeah.
And the only thing that you just, when you want something to work so bad, you just search for answers and search for
Yes.
answers.
Yep.
And attachment theory seemed to make the most sense of why we weren't working and
Yeah.
how we could work.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you the way out, not just
Yeah,
the why. Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. But unfortunately, I was the one that wanted to learn and soak this all
Mhm.
in, and my counterpart was, not thinking that
Yeah.
there was a problem. So, that's kind of where I became obsessed, and that's where relationship stuff just makes most sense, and that's why I get so excited to hear all this stuff. And for any of my listeners that might be having relationship struggles and they've looked for answers and searched for answers, hopefully we can maybe provide some of that today. So,
Yep.
would you mind just giving a brief overview of what is attachment and attachment theory?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really simple theory, if you really boil it all down. Um, I believe that attachment theory is the closest that science has come to explaining really truly how relationships work, what makes them successful, what makes them not successful. And that the great thing about that is it gives us a map. It just puts the words to all of these kind of nebulous concepts that we're all going around feeling in our bodies and, craving and wanting and knowing when it's not working, and but without these words. So it's giving us these words to kind of use as a guide. And the idea is that we are, biologically wired to feel safe with other humans, period, especially close, our, for lack of a better word, our tribe.
Mhm.
Humans are built to not be able to survive alone. We need each other for shelter, no, just their basic needs, shelter, food, procreation. And so for that to, happen, we have to have a sense of need for others. And on the flip side of that, a sense of anxiety when our relationships are threatened. That's how our bodies feel anxiety as a way to say, hey, find more safety, or, whatever. It's our body's way of teaching us to stay safe with our other humans and motivating us as a way of physically surviving. Well, fast forward to now, we're not living in, we're not cavemen, but we still have a primal instinct to need to feel safe with others. It not only does it keep us feeling safe, but it also is connection is why we're all here. I mean, why do we watch movies? Why do we listen to music? Because of this sense of connection. And if we lose our sense of connection to ourselves and others, it's just impossible to truly have a fulfilling life. And we have lost that connection. And one of the reasons that we have lost that connection is because we don't know how to emotionally support each other anymore. So emotional support is like the vehicle for attachment safety. The way that you communicate with another person is either going to be emotionally supportive or not emotionally supportive. And it's okay if you're not expecting emotional support from that person. If it's a coworker and you're there just to like get the job done, I mean,
Right.
there is still an argument for needing to feel respected and
Sure.
valued by someone. But so what's happening is that because we aren't able anymore to communicate in a way that is emotionally supportive with our loved ones and get communication back from them that helps us feel emotionally supported, then we're putting this enormous strain on our relationship. We're not feeling safe. And when we don't feel safe, we all have these ways of behaving,
Oh,
right? We all have, yeah, these different ways of behaving. It's like when I don't feel safe, when I'm having like relationship fears, how are you coping with it? And the way people behave can be categorized into four broad categories, right? So
yep.
we have someone with a secure attachment, they're going to behave in ways that are like, all right, you know what? I'm going to use my feelings here as a guide, and I'm also not going to get overwhelmed. This isn't really conscious thought, by the way. It's just the strategy. I'm going to use my brain and I'm going to think this through. And I have some skills here because I grew up in a safe home and I know how to communicate about wants and needs. And I'm going to reach to my partner and we're going to have this talk and we're going to feel connected at the end of it
Yep.
because we just know how to do this. We know the language. We know what emotional support is and isn't. We know how to talk about our feelings. There's, the other category is people who don't know how to do that. And they're going to be divided into three groups: anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. People who are anxious, they feel their relationship fear everywhere in their body. They're like, yes, yeah, I see you pointing to yourself. Me too, before I did this work.
Yep.
You feel it so big. You're on the lookout for any signs that you're being dropped or you're not being validated or you might be abandoned. And so you're constantly kind of like filtering your partner and your relationship through this negative lens because you're scared. You're wanting to prevent all these bad things from happening. And then when you get confirmed that, oh my gosh, I am being dropped, I am being abandoned, you go into overdrive, you protest, you blame, you reach, you get frantic. I mean, all these terrible things that you're doing because your nervous system is screaming, I'm not safe. I need to feel safe to feel okay. And what you've learned through your childhood is you change other people to feel okay. That's how you feel okay. You focus on other people instead of at the expense of self focus. Now, of course, we need people to change to feel close to them, right?
Right.
There's a lot of, truth to that.
Sure.
And anxious partners take this logic to way to the opposite, to an extreme, because that's how they were treated growing up, or
Right.
that's how they learned to get attention, enough attention, or enough of their needs met. If I protest and get big, then I'll get some love over here. If I don't, I'm going to just be ignored. Or my parents
Yeah.
are hypercritical and blaming, and that's how they get me to do better. So now
Yep.
that's how I'm going to reach to my partner. So
Yep.
there's the anxious attachment. And then we have this avoidant attachment where it's kind of the opposite. It's like, I'm just going to shove my needs away altogether,
Yep.
right? I'm just going to push them down. I don't want to know they're there. I don't want to know anything about them. If I show up, it's nothing is going to go well. There's going to be conflict. I'm going to end up feeling rejected or ignored. And then at some point, they don't even know this stuff is there anymore. It's now gone out of conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? Well, if you don't have an awareness of your pain, you certainly don't know how to help yourself with it. You certainly don't know how to get help from others with it. So there's two downsides to that. One is you can't let others in to help you because you don't even know what that looks like. And two, you can't help your partner because we help our partner in the same way we help ourselves. So if you have an avoidant attachment and you're going, well, I help myself by stuffing it away and talking myself down and just achieving and moving forward and working and to distract from my feelings and looking at the positive. How are you going to respond to your partner's pain? The exact same way. Defend against it, try to talk them down, try to talk them to the positive, don't talk
Yeah.
about things, don't fight. And so that's the avoidant attachment. Typically, someone with an avoidant attachment will be in a relationship with an anxious attachment. Lots of reasons for that. I won't go into now unless you want me to later. And then we have disorganized attachment. So if you
Yeah.
take a blender and you pour in some anxious and you pour in some avoidant and you pour in some trauma and you pour in a lot of fear and mistrust of others and a
Mhm.
lot of really big behaviors because the greater the fear, the greater people the greater the links people will go to behaviorally to manage the fears. It's everything's just more intense. You turn it on, you blend it all together, and then you take a glass and you pour the glass all over the disorganized smoothie all over the counter instead of into the glass.
Yeah.
And there's
Oh,
because there's no containment. And so it's just a really, you know, all of this happens to varying degrees. It's kind of everything's on a spectrum. Some people have more anxious attachment
sure.
than others. Some people are closer to secure with some avoidant tendencies here. I mean, most people are going to fit into one of those four categories. People with
Yeah.
disorganized, their inner turmoil is just massive. You know,
Yeah.
they are afraid of other people. They have a really hard time trusting. Everybody comes by this stuff honestly. It's all
Mm.
insecure. Nobody, you're not born with this. It's all relational. It
Yep.
comes from relationships. It can be healed in relationships. And, we if we grow up in an environment where we're not getting our emotional needs met enough of the time to feel secure,
Mhm.
we're gonna have fears. We're gonna have unmet emotional needs. We're gonna be acting out on that. We're gonna have consequences of that. I'm here to reverse all this and say, hey, I'm going to give you the skills. I'm going to teach you how to be emotionally supportive in your relationships. And that is how you're going to build secure attachment. And the degree to which this work works is the degree to which people can learn to support themselves emotionally, to support their partners emotionally, and to receive support from their partners emotionally.
Mm. Thank you for sharing all the different attachment styles. I feel like that would definitely help listeners, kind of be like, okay, that was me for sure. I
Yeah.
was that. Like I said, I was pointing at me when I was anxious
Yes.
attachment. It very much helped. My ex, I would like to say he is avoidant, and that's
Yeah.
where I got a lot of answers. Um, Man, you had said something. I really do like that often before we start any kind of work, we do want to change somebody else
Yes.
because that's way easier than here. Like, go change the other person. I will be okay. So I just love that you said, like, the degree to which you can help yourself, then help your
Yes.
partner. That's really important because as we know, the blaming others is
Yeah.
sometimes really easy, you
It
know?
it is a safe place for people with anxious attachment,
Yeah.
and there's a difference here between wanting someone to change and wanting to change someone. That
Mm.
there's a huge difference between those two.
Yeah.
And anxious attachment partners want both. They want someone to change and they think, look, this is how I help myself by kind of beating myself up all the time and shaming
Yeah.
myself. And that's what I know. And I have to be hyper focused on my external environment because my external environment let me down so much as a child.
Yep.
So I'm going to do everything in my power to change my partner. The problem is that whole behavioral complex of trying to change someone is you not changing. That's your
Yep.
that's part of, I mean, it's just
Exactly.
contributing to the problem, right?
Yep.
It's like you're in that space of the only way I'm going to be okay in life is if my partner lives up to all these expectations and changes in all these ways, which absolutely there's truth to wanting that. We need that for the relationship
Yeah.
to be close. But if your heart is in that place, you will never get there.
Right.
It's very Buddhist
Yeah.
paradoxical Buddhist paradoxes going on with all this work, you know,
Yeah. But
is what makes
it's
it incredibly difficult too.
exactly. Exactly. I feel like I had I feel like I had a double whammy. So it was very obvious to me, no secret that like my dad just wasn't emotionally available, wasn't in my life at any great capacity after my parents divorced. What really threw the loop was when my mom passed away when I was 25 and
Oh
I
god,
had already had my daughter when I was
I'm so
16.
sorry.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I appreciate that.
yeah,
So the abandonment like was already there a lot,
yeah.
and that's not fair for me to like my mom had no control over like passing away, but unfortunately the feelings I got was everybody in my life leaves at one
Oh,
capacity or another. Um
exactly. And
yeah,
that
and then my go ahead, sorry.
no, I'm just saying that's the message to you in your
Mhm.
little 25-year-old heart is closeness leads to intense, horrible loss and pain.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what happened inside my body because I did have debilitating anxiety for 10 years. It took me a good 7 to understand to pay attention every time it came up. And what I gathered in year 7 was that it was happening when things were so good with my little
Mhm,
family of my
mhm.
daughter and my ex-boyfriend, and I was so scared that something was going to come in and
Yeah.
demolish that because I've already
That
lost
and
the greatest.
that is one of the main factors in anxious attachment is the fear that all good things go away.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be like death. It could be that, the the environment of someone with an anxious attachment growing up is very unpredictable. They
Yep.
sometimes get connection, they sometimes don't. They sometimes get closeness, they sometimes don't. They sometimes get responded to positively when they're in emotional distress, they sometimes don't. So they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. They don't
Yeah.
count on it. They don't completely trust it ever because I might get you now, but are you going to be there for me tomorrow? Probably not.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah.
Now, why don't we talk about a little bit since we've talked about the attachment styles? How can we all, no matter what, and if you, I guess, if you want to break it down, you can. How do we move towards a secure attachment within a relationship?
Well, okay. So the first thing, first of all, I have a book. I don't know if you know about my book, but I
Yes.
have, yeah, okay, Secure Love. The whole book is written to help couples do this, right? I
Mm,
go first talk about attachment theory, really explain this stuff in depth. And then we go into, all right, you're this couple, you're reading this book. Where do you go from here? How do you heal? And I want to take couples in the book through the same process I use in my private practice. And so what
mhm,
I start with is I start with saying, all right, here's this negative cycle that you're getting stuck in. These repeated fights, the issues aren't getting resolved. You get in these ugly places with each other, where you're saying mean things, nothing gets resolved, and then you feel worse about it. And then you try to push stuff under the rug and just find closeness again. And you might have some peace for a while, but then bam, these negative cycles keep coming up because there's all these real relationship issues that aren't being resolved.
yeah,
And so the first thing I need to do is damage control, which is getting couples out of these negative cycles. And it's much easier. I can explain it much more thoroughly in the book, but it's basically like getting out of these behaviors that you're using um, to reach your partner or
mm,
to protect the relationship by not rocking the boat, not creating conflict. and both partners are contributing equally. I mean, very,
Yes.
very rarely do I see a couple where one partner is just worse than the other.
Yeah.
It does require willingness to change on both partners'
Mhm.
sides. But so I'm just here to say, hey, you gotta start not doing this. Instead of yelling and screaming, you've got to start talking vulnerably. You've got to start validating your partner's perspectives. You've got to start, getting out of this. And sometimes there, getting out of these cycles requires us to sit and face really hard feelings like powerlessness.
Yeah.
Like
Ooh,
if my partner's not responding to me in the way I like, I want to just start yelling and telling them how awful they are, because otherwise I'm just going to have to sit there and feel super powerless.
yeah.
But the tricky part is the yelling and the screaming is part of the problem. And sometimes we just have to get rid of not what's not working before we can start filling the relationship back up with what is going to create the closeness. So this is the
Mm.
damage control part. It's kind of like you've got this bucket of dirty water and different couples have different levels of dirty water, but we got to drain that bucket out. And that's getting
Yeah.
rid of these negative cycles. And now we have an empty bucket,
Mm.
and that can be a place where they don't really feel close. They're not
Okay.
tearing each other down. They're not distancing. They're not defending. They're not getting into these cycles, but they're also not connected.
Right.
So then I come in and I'm like, all right, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to, get this damage control done. We're going to learn how to interrupt these cycles. We're going to learn how to repair the cycles when they do happen. And
Mm.
now we're going to learn how to create an environment that prevents negative cycles, because we're going to bring in a lot of emotional support, a lot of more connection, and what I call in the book an attachment friendly environment. This is what an environment looks like between two people who have a secure attachment. This is how they talk to each other. This is how they behave. This is what they're doing that we don't have words for. You see a healthy couple, you don't know why they're healthy, right? You just think being
Yeah.
nice to each other. But I'm putting words. They're emotionally validating each other. They're really hearing and lovingly listening to each other. They're
Yep.
communicating vulnerably. They're not shaming each other. They're not raising concerns with criticism. They're not overly focused on what the other one is doing to the degree that it's just like a power struggle of control.
Mm.
There's just, the book outlines all of this. So I'm going to teach you how to bring this in. And
Okay.
then now we have that. Now we're going to build up the good stuff, right? But now we have blocks to good stuff. I mean, this is all great, right? Except for when you're really trying to do this work, all these blocks come up. A lot of times, these blocks are rooted in past wounds,
Yeah.
meaning all these mistrusts, all these times we've been felt really let down, dropped, betrayed. It could be anything from a huge affair to just chronically feeling put down, demeaned, to just even something like chronic lateness can cause a
Mm.
wound if
Yeah.
it's just so often that it's really leaving you feeling like I don't matter to my partner.
Right.
So now we have to go back, and now that we have these negative cycles stabilized and we're better at speaking to each other safely, we need to have some healing conversations about the past, get
Mm.
some of that cleaned up.
Okay.
And those aren't always just one conversation. Sometimes if the conversations are happening in a way that is actually healing, instead of just becoming another negative cycle. Well,
Right.
I wouldn't have had to have an affair if you would have been more, sexually available to me. Well, I would have been more sexually available if you wouldn't have been so emotionally unavailable. It's like
Yeah.
we can't get stuck in those loops, and I'm teaching you
Right.
how to not do that. And
Yeah.
then, when it's all kind of feeds on itself. Couples get stronger as they practice this. They get better at talking about old wounds when they flare up. They get
Mhm.
better at not going into negative cycles when we're talking about the dishes. They get better at communicating in a way that prevents negative cycles. They get better at emotional connection, intimacy, closeness.
Okay. Oh, that was beautiful. You did it in a very like obviously you wrote a book, you know how to do it, but like in a very structured way. Now, one of my most favorite things that you do on your Instagram profile um is really do write out the conversations that
Mhm.
couples can have with each other no matter what the wounding was happening. But you
Mhm.
know, kind of say like, "Oh, person A says this and then, person B could potentially respond." And it some people might not have ever even have heard those words ever in their life. They didn't come from a family like that to know, whoa, like that
Totally.
that
Yeah.
sounds very normal, or that sounds great. Um, but you really do have such a great way to give people real practical, like, save this post, and if you
Yeah.
kind of get in this situation, use this verbiage, um, to
Yeah. I mean, that,
help.
one of the reasons I did, well, two reasons I did that. One is that, part of my parenting struggle that I was talking about at the beginning. And first of all, just to let you know, this work has absolutely transformed my relationship with my kids. Like it's
Wow.
transformative. And my husband, but
Yeah.
really oddly, because I'm a couples therapist, this work was motivated by my relationship with my kids, but blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Getting off topic here. I needed words. I was reading all these self-help books and I was like, okay, these concepts are great, but like I need to know what to say in these really tense moments. You can't just stand there like with your mouth dropped, frozen, and knowing everything wrong that's happening, but not knowing the words. And that was probably one of the most frustrating things for me is like getting things conceptually, but not having that ability to take that leap. So I wrote an entire chapter in the book
Oh,
on chapter 13. It's called Instead of This, Say This. And it's an entire chapter. I came up with every situation I could imagine. Like your partner's annoying you. You need more help around the house. You want to go to couples therapy, but your partner doesn't want to. And just like two or three different um,
wow.
options for what to say, but not just what to say, here's the words, because, we all need to integrate that and create make them our own. But so
Right.
what I did is it's not just the words, but I'm also going to break it down and tell you why I chose this
Mm,
structure. I'm going to lead
okay.
with a validation and create some safety here. And then I'm going to show up with my need and share it from a place of self. And here's the impact on me. And how can we work together here? So it's kind of like I'm going to teach you the principles and the words.
Yep.
And then in
Okay.
my work with couples, really that's what we do. Like I don't this sounds kind of controlling. It's really not, and it's not the end goal. But when I'm working with couples, I don't let them talk to each other for a while. I do let them talk to each other, but I tell them what to say.
Yep.
And it's not me making it up. It's me working with a partner for 30 minutes or so to really get down to the heart of what's going on with them and their real heart out of these protections. And then can you share this with your partner? Here's what I want you to say.
Yep.
And that keeps it really clean. And then what happens is over time, those words start to become their own.
Mm, that's beautiful. I was telling you about Derek Hart. I think that's what he
Mhm.
does too, which is something I had
Probably does.
never
Yeah.
seen before, and I'm like, he literally just said all the words that I would love to hear from a
With
partner,
your
and I'm like,
partner. Yeah.
exactly.
It's interesting because I think that probably hope I don't offend anyone here, but I think probably the people that are the most successful out there speaking about attachment theory are probably EFT therapists. Because
Okay.
we don't just become experts in attachment theory, we become experts in using attachment theory to help couples. And
Yeah.
there's a real difference in the quality of information between, someone
Yeah.
who's using it to help couples and someone who's not. And EFT is really the gold standard of all research backed couples therapy, but it's definitely the gold standard of attachment
Yeah.
couples therapy.
And that's so interesting because I think, for me, maybe I had heard of that before, but until I looked at your website, I
Hmm.
hadn't. And so I was literally when I read it EFT, I thought it was the freedom technique, like literally
Yeah,
tapping. And I was like,
yeah.
wait, what?
It's
um,
really confusing because there's actually three EFTs. There's the
oh hell.
tapping one, and there's the couples one, and then there's this other one that is entirely something different, but it kind of
Yeah.
related. But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
yeah, no, it's emotionally focused therapy for couples, and it's amazing. I mean, Sue Johnson created it based on
yeah.
attachment theory back in the 90s, the late
Okay.
90s. It's got more research backing than any other type of couples therapy. I mean, I would say the downside to it is it's a simple modality to learn, but incredibly difficult, if not
Mm,
impossible to master. I mean, those of us who are doing it, we're constantly learning more and more and more. I mean, think about it.
yeah.
It's like humanity is so complicated. Mastering EFT is kind of like mastering humanity, and
Yeah.
so we're obsessed with it. I mean, the people I know that are EFT therapists, like we literally don't get burnout because our
Yeah.
job is so fulfilling and effective. But it's only as effective as the therapist doing it.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
sometimes you do need to shop around a bit because some people are new to it and, and some
Yeah.
people aren't quite as obsessed with it. And, that's going to show up and maybe
Yeah.
not as much skills because they're not as motivated. So,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I definitely want to look more into it just because I tend to go down all the different rabbit holes, with different
yeah.
podcast, guests and everything. I'm like, what is this? And then I go down that rabbit hole. But
Well, if you don't go down any other rabbit hole, that's the rabbit hole to go down,
okay, good.
in my opinion. Yeah.
Good. That makes
Um,
me happy.
yeah. Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson. But honestly, like, um, I would just look at iceeft.com because
Oh,
there is also an individual version of EFT, which is
okay.
emotionally focused individual therapy. But I will say this, I'm probably a bigger fan for individuals of somatic therapy.
Okay.
Just to put that out there.
Yeah.
That is probably my number one recommendation for individual therapy and
Okay.
then EFT for couples.
Good to
And all
know.
my therapists that work for me at the securerelationship.com
Mhm.
are highly trained in EFT, just to put that out there.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And they
Okay.
work all around the globe.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, something also you had spoke a little bit about it, but something that I notice vulnerability, like how important is vulnerability in a relationship?
It is everything. Nothing happens without it. So, and I'll tell you why. This is interesting because I do a Wednesday night meeting every 2 weeks for
Oh,
people to come, and we
okay.
have, people on screen and do a different topic every other week. We have a little group going. It's a beautiful, lovely little group. Love,
Yeah.
love, love, love this group.
Oh,
Um, and so last night the topic was vulnerability, and vulnerability is everything because you're either going to be communicating from vulnerability or communicating from protection when you're in distress. And if you're communicating from protection, it's not emotionally supportive. You're in an enemy mindset. You're scared. It's the opposite of connection. Protection's the opposite of connection. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing to be in a protected state, right?
right.
Sometimes it makes sense. Your nervous system is
Yeah.
wise to be in a protective state. But if you're trying to connect with a partner, it will not work unless you can get to a place of vulnerability. Now, there's all different blocks to vulnerability. One of the blocks is people not being vulnerable because they're scared of it for good reason, because they have never had they grew up not having safety with vulnerability, having to learn to hide. Another
Right.
reason there's a block to vulnerability is because the relationship can't hold it. One or both partners aren't able to hold each other's
Mm,
vulnerability. So that's a reality too. But let's just
yeah.
put that to the side and
Mm,
let's deal with how to become more vulnerable.
mhm.
Becoming more vulnerable is taking any action that requires you to feel very uncomfortable for the greater good of yourself or your relationship. That's the way I kind of describe it. Sometimes vulnerability looks like, instead of yelling and screaming, talking about how afraid you are, talking
Mm,
about your shame, talking about your deeper issues, reaching for help, asking for
yeah.
reassurance. Sometimes asking for reassurance is the protection. It just, it really can depend. One
Yeah.
behavior isn't necessarily vulnerable or not vulnerable. It's where you're coming from the inside.
Yeah.
Um, and feeling, instead of yelling, sitting and feeling powerless. Just that is
Mm,
vulnerable. Nobody wants to sit with powerlessness. It sucks. It's horrible. It's like burning your body up, like
yeah.
shame. Um, and then, so for another person, vulnerability might be setting a boundary. I
Mm,
can't stay in
mm,
this argument if you're going to yell at me.
yeah.
I feel small. I feel attacked. I feel horrible. I feel sad. I feel alone. I feel mad. I
Yeah.
can't do this. If we can't not yell, I got to go and come back later. Some
Yeah.
people, they don't want to do that. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make their
Mm,
partner mad. They'll just sit there and be yelled at. So you see how vulnerability is really just, it's what's your vulnerability? What do
okay.
you need to do different that's not protecting yourself for the goal of connection or self-care?
Wow. Okay. I have more to think on with that one because well, I can for sure say I wasn't always able to be vulnerable. Um
Mm-hmm.
not because of my partner, but because of my own stuff. Like I don't want to put that blame on him because that's not fair. It was my own protection of,
Sure.
oh, well, I don't want to speak out because I'm not going to get what I want. So why would I say anything in the first place? Like that doesn't have to do with him. That I just can't state my
Yeah.
need and be vulnerable.
Right.
Um,
And there's truth to that. You really were in a relationship with someone that probably wasn't able to help you with those
yeah,
feelings and your emotional needs. But we
yeah,
still have to be able to share those needs and share the impact of not having those needs met.
yeah.
And we
Ugh.
don't do that because we'd rather be dropped for yelling than dropped for asking and not receiving.
How crazy is that?
I know because it's easier to make sense of being dropped for
I
yelling.
know because it's happened like yeah, some of the I am just I had that like big aha moment a couple weeks ago. I'm like, why is it so hard for us to ask for stuff like I mean, I get it, but
It's
some
just, if we hear no, I can't meet you where you are. I can't give you what you want. It's immediately going to go into the darkest shame place that we
yeah.
may or may not be aware of. And that
Ugh.
shame place is saying, what is it about me that nobody wants to show up for me and meet my needs? What is it about me? And it can be so much easier to stuff that away and live in this place that's, what is it about you that you refuse to meet my needs?
Mm. Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about shame? Like how much of our stuff is coming from shame? Don't
I
ruin
mean,
my day.
I think all of it. I mean, I think that all of our behaviors around not getting the connection that we're needing. I mean, it's healthy to fear disconnection. It's
Okay.
healthy to want connection. It's healthy to be upset when you're not getting connection. It's a healthy drive. It's healthy to be angry when you're not getting the connection that you need. It's
Mhm.
healthy to feel grieved about that. What's not healthy is some of the ways people handle all of that stuff.
Okay.
And that's where shame comes into the picture,
Mm.
where we don't want to face our own, am I really unlovable? Nobody wants to sit with that. It's easy intellectually, but when you really get down into the heart of it and you start feeling that, there's a lot of costs associated to I'm not lovable. And the cost is I'm going to end up being rejected. Am I just unlovable to people? And where's that
Right.
going to leave me?
Yeah.
Alone, never in a relationship where I get to feel connected, always having to wonder, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Nobody wants to go there. It's easier just to stay up there, get you to change, get you to change, get you to change. That's why with the anxious partners, there's no amount of changing their partners can do that will ever be enough if they're not addressing the shame. And the same is true with an avoidant partner. There's no amount of change in the relationship or your ability to show up for your partner in the way that they're needing that you will ever find until you start really getting into the shame. I just put a post up about this
I
today.
saw it. I
Oh,
saw it.
okay. Yeah, okay.
And I'm like,
Um, yeah. It's all, I mean, all of the quote unquote bad behaviors, and when I say bad, I mean ineffective, that are getting in your way, are
mhm.
shame rooted. But
Okay.
all of the fears and needs are human rooted.
Okay.
Needs and fears are two sides of the same coin. There's nothing wrong with fears and needs. Fears can overcome you and they can be at too much of a degree. Needs can be not really needs, but inappropriate wants to keep your self feeling safe, right?
Mm,
There's a
yeah.
lot of theoretical stuff coming out of my mouth right now. It's kind of hard to sort through it all, but yeah, I mean, it's the shame that causes us to do things that don't work.
Yeah.
They cause us to hide. It causes us to not be vulnerable. Shame wants to hide itself. Nobody even wants to say I have shame. I
Right.
mean, it could be very difficult for people to even say that
Yeah.
because if I say that, that means you're going to see it. And what if
Yeah.
you agree with it? Yeah. And then there's the crux of it. It's like if you agree with it, you're going to reject me. You can't accept me. People don't accept shameful people.
Right.
and the cost is this fear of the darkest, worst spot, which is sitting there feeling alone. And nobody fears sitting there feeling alone to the degree that people with insecure attachment fear it unless they've experienced it. Unless you've
Mm,
sat in your room feeling let down, betrayed, sad, alone, humiliated, bullied,
yeah.
invalidated, rejected, invisible.
Yeah.
Anybody who's struggling with this stuff has sat in a room with those emotions in their bodies and they say, I don't ever want to go to this place again. So I need to find a partner who can show up for me and never, ever do I have to feel this way.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that for
Yeah.
sure. Well, Julie, this has been wonderful. You answered so many questions and broke down all the different styles. Um, I definitely feel like my listeners will get lots out of this. But
I hope
if they
so.
want to learn more about, attachment and everything that you teach, where can people find out more about your work, your new book, and all that great
Well,
stuff?
the most thorough place, and first of all, thank you for your kind words. I hope this was helpful. It's always
Yeah.
my number one goal is to be helpful. The most thorough place is the book Secure Love,
Okay.
available everywhere, multiple languages. It's all over the country. I'm all over the globe. Secure Love, um, and then my Instagram account has a lot, as you know. I don't hold back on information, but
No.
more disjointed, on stuff than the book can
Yeah.
be. The
Yeah.
book is just much more of a flow. And then the securerelationship.com, that's where you're going to find um, my own therapy practice, me and my, therapists that work for me that do this work. We're all really passionate and committed. I do about once a month, I do some sort of workshop. I'll do like
Okay.
an avoidant attachment, an anxious attachment. Right now, the next one coming up is a mini couples workshop, 3 hours.
Okay.
Um, and, I have my Wednesday night group, things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. You had all kinds of stuff going on.
I do. I do. I have a great, and I got my kids, and I have a nice little balance going. I've really
That
been
is
in,
great.
yeah, my goal, my work in the last few weeks has been, I got to bring sustainable balance to my life. It's
Yeah.
been push, 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 get the book done, get the book done, get the
Uh,
book done, and then get the book out there, get the book. It's releasing, and now it's just kind of like, all right, I got to find a speed that,
yeah.
you know, a cruise speed.
Yeah. You're like,
That's
I
not
can't do
easy.
that speed forever.
No,
Yeah.
no. So.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Now, before you go, I do ask my guests all of this question at the end.
Okay.
Um, in your own words, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
Oh gosh, skiing.
Ah,
No.
yes.
I mean, honestly, like let's just say this. My number one passions are my family and working with clients.
Yeah.
Hands down. But my fun in life is skiing. And if you add in skiing with my friends or family, then it just got exponentially better.
Yeah.
As long
That's
as they're
awesome.
better skiers than me. I hate skiing with people who aren't
Want them to be better or worse?
better.
Oh,
'Cause I'd rather follow someone around than have to wait for people.
we will not be going skiing. I can assure you of that.
Okay.
Because oh, it's a disaster. It's a
Yeah.
disaster. So
Well, it's not for everyone.
it's
And
oh,
I
it's
have a
not.
lot of injuries built up, so it's probably wise to not love skiing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I'll stick to the basketball and volleyball because
Yeah, there you go. See?
exactly.
I wanna see